Welcome to Inner Landscapes, the podcast where we explore our inner worlds, modern life, ancient wisdom, creativity, healing, and running an alternative business.
Inner landscapes.
Welcome back, everyone, to Inner Landscapes. We're on episode 6, and we have a special guest with us today, Naudia. She's our wonderful pal in business and life. Me and Naudia met through a business membership, and then Alice as well met Naudia in a different business membership. Naudia is a certified transformational coach, and she helps others get unstuck and find aligned ways of living through personalized coaching journeys that she will tell us a little bit more about. And she's also, very interestingly, a founder of a bamboo anti-insect sleepwear company, which was inspired by her experiences with travel and nomadic living. So yeah, we will have a little chat with Naudia today. Welcome. And Alice is here as well. Say hi.
Hello, everybody. Nice to see you again.
Hi, Naudia.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. Really excited to be here.
Nice. So, in every episode, we share what our inner landscapes are looking and feeling like today. So just to model it for you, Naudia, Alice, do you want to go first?
hmm I'm really sorry, but I accidentally cheated on my inner landscape again today because I thought about this when I was in the shop. I'm trying really hard to just turn up and vibe with it, but then sometimes it just comes, early. So I was in the shopping centre and which I literally never go to. But I did try to go to last week on a holiday and it was really hot and I was sweating on my way there and I got there and it was closed because it's a holiday. And then I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go today for a second chance. Really hot and sweaty again. Was wandering around this space because I've been looking for the last few weeks to find some shorts that aren't tight on my belly because my pregnant belly is getting really big. And then I was just thinking about how my life feels really like a fairground ride at the moment. And there's all these kind of like nonsensical, weird things that I'm doing and like fleeting between one thing and another. And it all feels a bit like techno lights and, like ping, 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 ping sounds and stuff like this. Because I think mind, but also body is starting to settle into this like slightly slower pace of moving towards the end of my pregnancy. And work has changed a lot recently. And so everything is just becoming slower. But of course, our mind takes a little bit of time to catch up with that. So at the moment, my mind feels really kind of carnival fairground, slightly neon signs and like lots of, but also with this lots of play and excitement and niceness. um but yeah, it's a slightly synthetic inner landscape somehow at the moment. It doesn't feel quite as like rooted and earthy as it has recently. Yeah.
Interesting. I like how I don't remember what it was last time we spoke, but there's always a lot of like groundedness and not so much roller coaster feeling for you. So I think, yeah, that also must be linked to what's happening inside, like biologically.
Yeah, definitely. It feels like a very, very new space to be in, which is not necessarily bad, but also just, yeah, different is always a little bit unsettling in some ways, isn't it?
Mm, yeah.
How about you, Martina?
I think in an interesting way, I'm sort of mirroring you because I also feel like there's a bit of like commotion. I wasn't thinking about it specifically this morning, but I was just thinking about how I was feeling, and it just felt like I'm dragging myself through the mud a little bit, and it's really quiet around me. It's almost like some kind of apocalyptic movie scene. Um, which sounds very different to like what you are looking at right now. Like I'm smiling and there's sunshine outside. I've had sort of like a period of reclamation and coming back to myself, and there was a high that came with it, and now it's like the kind of the quiet after the storm almost. But the storm wasn't in a negative way, it was actually it was like a storm of change and transformation. But there's always a bit of a calm down afterwards, and I think that's why it feels like I am dragging, but actually maybe my nervous system is just catching up that the landscape is now quieter. So yeah, I'm just trying to roll with it and not judge it too much. And it helps to like name it in terms of visuals.
That's
Yeah.
really beautiful and like really compassionate as well to name it, but without judgment. Because sometimes when you feel like you're going through huge resistance, there can also be a lot of self-criticism attached with this, or like I wish it was different. But just being
Mm,
able to sit with it is a really, really beautiful thing.
thank you. I'll take that. What about yours,
Mm.
Nadia? Yeah, how to
Yeah,
describe your inner landscape?
I love how visual both of your descriptions were. It really painted a picture. So yeah, I was just kind of reflecting on my own as you were sharing. I think similar in some ways, there's been a lot of like movement over the last few weeks because I've been traveling across Europe on a road trip and I'm now kind of landing back in the UK. And I feel like there's still a sense of kind of tiredness and adjustment to the stillness, but I can feel that's kind of what I'm craving and also wanting. So I think I'm kind of switching to that kind of landing and settling, but I think my body is still adjusting to it, and maybe my mind is as well. But then I think also with that stillness, there's a kind of excitement of getting on with some other stuff. So yeah, a little bit of like a limbo in transition, kind of yin and yang going on at the same time in a way, which kind of I guess mirrors a bit of my week with a lot going on, but also having time to just actually settle in. So in that sense, it's no surprise that that's kind of what's coming through on the inner landscape side of things.
I think I might be
Mm.
obsessed with that phrase that you just said of limbo in transition. I'm like, that needs to be the title of a painting or a poem or something. That sounds so good.
I love that. I actually, yeah, I really believe that we are always, they call liminal spaces, right? So we're like always in a liminal space of sorts. And it makes sense, especially if you're back from travel and now kind of slowing down. And then there's going to be another transition, another liminal space after
Mm.
that. Like, yeah. So on the topic of travel, we wanted to talk to you a little bit more about how you use travel as an intentional container for inner work. And I know you help others do the same. You and I, we connected over us loving solo travel. So I was just wondering what influenced you and how, how do you lead yourself and others through this process of transformation through travel?
As you said, it's been like a big part of my life and something that I've just naturally kind of gravitated towards. So I kind of love using travel as these intentional spaces. So when we travel, we're naturally usually holding space for more kind of insights and creativity to flow because we're in a new environment. We're kind of disrupting our patterns and we're more open and receptive to things. And I think on some level, have always kind of sensed that, but wasn't able to kind of name it and work as intentionally with it when I was younger. But I think where I've always been quite introspective and introverted, I've kind of leaned into holding space for myself in those kind of ways. But what really led to seeing travel as an opportunity for these kind of more potent containers of transformation was when I took a more intentional trip almost a decade ago when I was in a really bad place myself. So I was incredibly burnt out and not in a good place physically, mentally in the corporate world and just very lost and stuck. And I took a big kind of leap of faith to leave behind my job, my home, to do traveling for a few months. And at the time, it was, completely out of my comfort zone. As much as I'd gravitated towards kind of holding space for myself, I'd never done this kind of backpacking travel at the time. And there were so many kind of fears and resistance that came up around it. And I knew it was going to be a turning point in my life. So I went into that very intentionally wanting to change my life with it. I didn't know how. I was kind of open to ideas, but I knew I didn't want to come back to the life that I left. And that was a kind of first time of seeing how transformative travel could be, because very quickly I was able to be confronted with the kind of patterns and habits that I'd been picking up along my entire life, and see how conditioned I was being and lost in the way we think we should be, and not really holding space for getting to know who I was beneath that. So again, I didn't really have language for it at the time, but I was able to start connecting back in with my intuition and who I was beneath all of this. And I also started having ideas come through for businesses and things that felt quite resonant. And when I came back, I was quite intentional then with exploring those things further. And then kind of fast forward a few years, I really saw how every time I was traveling, I was being quite intentional before, during, and after. And that kind of started paving the way to how I could hold space for others with my transformation coaching, which I was then certified in. But being able to use this time away as not just exploring the world and cultures, but also going inwards to hold space for whatever's coming up or whatever needs to be shared, or if there is a change you're desiring to make, to actually put together a practical integration plan after, so that you're kind of making the most out of that transformative time and the potential that it has when you are away.
So, off the back of that, I know you've just been on a road trip, and just to maybe give our listeners like an example of, how you have used that road trip for your own introspective work. Did you lay the foundations beforehand, or like had a plan, an intention? Like, yeah, if you could speak to that, that'd be great.
Yeah, that's a really good question, especially as it's so recent. So
Yeah.
I knew, and often what I would say is often I am working part-time remotely as well. So it's helpful in that I can use it for work as well as kind of personal introspection. But yeah, the intention for this trip was one, to just hold space to kind of just do nothing and be more with myself. But from a work side, I wanted to kind of get clarity on what I was going to focus on for the rest of the year. I had quite a lot of resistance around a few things that I was being pulled towards, but wasn't sure if I was putting up kind of too much stuff on my plate. And what really started coming through during this trip, and there's a lot to it, but kind of as an overarching theme that kept coming back, was I was still in some ways attaching what I was doing to the results I was getting back, or I was kind of relying on things and people outside of me to get a sense of a certain feeling. And I was getting really clear messages and insights over my time away of really coming back within to intrinsically meet all of my needs. And then from that place, moving forward with what I was called to do with work, or whether it's that space and time for myself. So I think what I often find is there's like a theme, and then that begins to unfold in quite a profound way over that time that I'm away. And sometimes it is just because I'm in a new environment and I've got a bit more time to myself, or sometimes it just seems to be like an orchestration of events and sequences and synchronicities that seem to link in with that theme. And maybe because I'm more open and receptive to it, I'm more clearly able to see the patterns. And I think once I saw it, I was able to really hold the space to keep coming back within and feel into what I then wanted to move forward with. So over the time I was away, I made a kind of definitive decision around launching my YouTube and started creating some content for that. I also launched a free monthly session that I launched very quickly, I think in the span of like a week or two, which I had resistance on, but realised I was just being called to share more and get my message out in a more fluid way. And all of that, I think, was coming through because of the travel container that it was being held for. And I've now kind of come back with absolute clarity on what I'm focusing on for the rest of the year, but also a more kind of embodied reminder of always coming back within intrinsically for all of my needs, and to really try and practice what I preach as best as I can.
Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about like what your days look like when you go and do this, because as I hear
Mm.
you say all of this, I'm like, how do you get to a point of all of this kind of introspection, tuning into your intuition, learning whilst being in a new environment? And there must be so much temptation to kind of be distracted by the newness of this environment?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I feel like there is an art to that balance, and it's one that I'm continuing to practice. Ultimately, what I try and come back to is kind of what I'm intuitively called to do. So, whether I'm intuitively called to go and explore or I get a nudge to go somewhere, then I know there's something there for me. So, there was like one morning where I just felt called to drive to the beach, but then I was journaling on that beach and getting a lot of those insights through. But there was something about being on a moody beach because the weather wasn't even that good that day. And it was kind of mirroring the stuff that was coming through me. So it was a kind of intuition that led me there. And it was a combination of being somewhere new, but also getting quite practical insights through. But then I am quite disciplined with my time to actually hold that space for the integration. So whether it's journaling or whatever, again, I'm called to do, because I try and always come back to my intuition and say there's not like one rule for one bit of time. It might look different at different points. Typically speaking, it might be like a few days of the week that I am doing more focused stuff, working remotely. Then there might be other days where I'm like exploring for half the day, but I will usually have like my journal with me to capture things that are coming through. And then I might be working the second half of the day, or then having like a whole weekend exploring. But where my schedule is quite flexible, I'm able to kind of weave the exploring within the work. So yeah, I might be working over the weekend, exploring in the week. There's not kind of too many rules around that.
Nice. And is there anything else other than journaling that you have as kind of like a ritual of travel? Because me and Martina talk a lot about like coloring in, painting, journaling, somatic work. Are there other tools that you kind of take with you that you rely on?
Yeah, and I do again come back to my intuition to see what I'm called to do, but I do often, I mean, I have a meditation practice that I do daily-ish, and also movement, and that might include listening to music that feels resonant with the phase that I feel I'm in, and then just intuitively moving. I was doing quite a lot of that actually over one of the stretches where I was in Belgium. I just really felt called to move, and obviously there must have been things shifting within me, so I was doing quite a bit of that. And I mean, I love holding space for creativity. I can't say I'm as consistent with it, but I'm trying to use more time to just paint and draw. So I do enjoy that as well as a bit of an outlet. But then also just being in nature. And I think that's what links in quite nicely with the travel. So naturally, I'll be more in nature when I travel. I feel like it's a permission slip we give ourselves to actually go out more in the world, which we often struggle with back at home. So often it is just being in that new place, walking around, whether it's nature or even in the city centre. And it's almost like you notice so much more, and you're taking stuff in a different way. So I think that naturally is always kind of part of the journey as well.
Yeah, I was with my friend in the park yesterday and we were both just saying, why can't we spend all of our time under the trees in the park? Like how nice it is to just be in those environments that are green and alive and full of movement and stuff. So I totally get that. There's also something to do with kind of chemical releases and stuff like this that I think literally 2 minutes in nature gives you like a little bit of a dopamine
Yeah.
hit. It's really, really good for your whole body energy-ness.
I was going to say something about how not having the distractions of your everyday life, and then let alone taking yourself to a beach or a green space, creates the space, the headspace. For me, that has been like the biggest gift of travel, that I'm not distracted by, I don't know, cleaning my room, watering my plants. There's always something to do. Yes, great, those things need to be done, but this is like a permission to not be getting distracted with them, and actually, especially as a business owner, to then sit with your vision and mission and your intention for growth of this brainchild of yours that you continuously are creating. Do you find that, because you say you are led by your intuition, is there like an element of like energetic, like measuring your energy as well? And that could be whichever way you want to look at it. It could be like looking at your cycle, or just looking at like how much energy you've spent on what during the travel. Like, because sometimes that might not be the most intuitive thing to do. Like you might want to intuitively go to the beach, but actually maybe you've already spent a lot of energy on being out. How do you make those decisions if it's to preserve energy that you might use somewhere else?
Yeah, that makes sense. And it actually kind of ties into this framework that I use across my work. So I use something that I've called the kind of Bloom Blueprint, which talks about these kind of four phases which mirror the seasons that we see in nature. So this is often what I kind of come back to see, am I more in this kind of autumn shedding phase or rooting back in winter, coming back to body and conserving energy, or am I emerging out back into the world in spring with intuition coming through, or more in that summer of kind of fuller expression and creativity? So I usually use that as my kind of framework to check in on where I am and what I need. And I think this is especially important for me because I'm quite introverted, and also I've realised more in recent years, being kind of neurodivergent as well, the needs in terms of what I individually need to take care of myself and my energy, which has been this kind of ongoing learning process of self-acceptance, but also almost kind of putting away the rule book of how we think we need to be societally, and really checking in on what I need and what's going to support my energy and that nourishment. So this has been such kind of an important theme for me personally. So I kind of use that framework to just acknowledge and bring awareness of where I am, because that almost brings in the kind of permission slip to honor that phase and honor what I truly need. And if it's staying in more, then that's absolutely okay. I have to kind of almost psych myself out more to go out. So it's more that way around that I struggle with, as opposed to the other way. I could probably be by myself for months and I'd be absolutely thriving. So I have to sometimes kind of remind myself of use the energy to come out into the world. And yeah, it's more that kind of that way around. But I think that just helps to check in and have that checkpoint, as you said, which I think is so important. And I think also does fit in with cycles and everything else going on as well within.
So for example, I mean, we all understand the analogy of the seasons, but there's like what I talk about with the menstrual cycle work. There is like lights and shadows to each season. So maybe for you, through the Bloom framework, your phase of autumn might not necessarily correspond to your inner autumn in terms of the menstrual cycle, but then you'll pick up on the qualities that are more autumnal of whatever you're feeling energetically and like link the hormonal to it. Is that what you're saying? Like,
Yeah, so it's almost like multiple things happening at the same time. So there's the kind of outer season and then the inner season, but then there's also what might be happening physically, body-wise, with your moon, or anything else as well that's kind of impacting your health and well-being. But what I tend to find is the kind of inner bloom phase seems to kind of link and correlate with where you intrinsically are. So yeah, there's kind of nuance and layers to it. But what I've also found though is it's not so linear, and that we can almost be cycling through the phases on a kind of micro macro level. So there might be moments where you're actually cycling through it all the phases in one day, but then there's kind of an overarching theme going on as well. So
got
there's
you.
like so much nuance to it, but it's a moment to moment check in. But you'll probably get a sense of what that overall energy vibe is at the moment. But also just checking in, because wherever you are, there might be a surge of something that comes up, or a moment of needing to come back in. So it's almost kind of letting go of those assumptions and having a moment to moment check in of where you truly are and what you truly need, because so much is shaped by the perceptions and everything else going on. But there is a kind of overarching phase usually.
This feels so radical and cool in comparison to where you said when you left your corporate job and you went traveling 10 years ago. Like, it feels like you've gone on this whole massive journey of discovering exactly how life works for you through travel, and that you can then bring that home with you as well afterwards. And that's actually the next thing we were going to think about, wasn't it? This idea of home and safety that we were talking about in our last episode.
Because you mentioned you could spend weeks and weeks on your own at home and you would be perfectly happy. So I wonder, let's link it maybe to the idea of home. So we, in the last episode, we talked about home as a concept and what it means to us externally and internally, and how to like create that inner safety and home within as well. And I wonder, with the travel and especially the solo travel, which, you know, can also be perceived as quite radical for a woman to be still to be traveling solo. I wonder how you find that sense of safety and home while on the road. And when I say safety, yeah, it can be, you can interpret that in many ways.
Yeah, and I think when you are traveling solo, it's such a good opportunity to come back to feeling at home and safety within because it is a real testing time. But I think as we've kind of touched
Mm.
on, it is that kind of inner experience. So whatever we're experiencing in life, it's always shaped by our inner experience. So the perceptions and beliefs we have. So no subject is off limit. So home and safety are included within that. So that's the truth I always kind of come back to, that knowing I can cultivate that feeling of safety and being at home within and that sense of belonging. And this is something I really struggled with younger. So it's been such a journey and a profound realization that, I don't have to wait or get permission. I can actually feel that feeling within. So I do what I can to kind of remind myself of that and come back to feeling that wherever I am. And I think being out of your comfort zone is really, really testing and a time to see if you can actually truly do that in practice. And I think also if I am walking around somewhere that feels quite sketchy, which does happen, especially in certain parts of the world, I also do this thing of like projecting a shield of love around me,
Mm.
which is really helpful just to relax and feel into being like protected. And whether, I guess, depending on your beliefs, you can feel into how it would work. But I think for me, it at least kind of relaxes me and allows me to move forward with more confidence. So I do also lean on that. And the question around home, I think this is something that's been really alive for me, especially as I've been living quite nomadically for the last year and moving around quite a bit. And as much as I also do the kind of going back within and creating that sense, I also am being much more mindful of whenever I arrive somewhere, doing what I can to really ground and land in the place. So rather than just rushing off to do whatever I need to do or exploring, actually being mindful of how can I root and get comfortable in that space. And it might be practical things, but actually being really intentional with that. And I think that's helped me ground and settle and not feel so uprooted, given that I am moving about so much. But also, it can be really empowering knowing you can feel comfortable and at home wherever you are. Like when you can really begin embodying that, it means you can move through the world wherever because it's always coming from within. And it's not to say I won't feel inspired to have more of a base at some point because I think there's absolute pros and cons to both. But ultimately, wherever I am, I know I can kind of come back to that feeling within. So that's
Mm.
what's mostly helped me, I feel.
That's beautiful. Yeah, wherever you go, there you are. And there is home, because the home is within. Alice, t tell us about your like what's while you're listening to this, and I know both myself and Nadia, we both travel solo. What has been your travel experience?
No, I haven't really traveled solo at all. So I've done travel to get from one person to another on my own. If I'm going between places that I've already visited before, it doesn't stress me out. But for example, like I remember being on a trip with a good friend of mine, and we were just going around. We did like Croatia and Hungary together for 2 weeks. And then I took the train from Hungary to Romania to meet my friend who's from there. And I should have changed train and I didn't. And I just remember like this huge feeling of like overwhelm. And when I get frustrated or angry about something, my bodily default is cry, which is so annoying. But that is what my body does. And I'm like trying to kind of deal with it as I move into adult life because it doesn't feel good. But, sometimes you just got to let it all out. So I just remember being on this train and like really upset. And the train guard was very, very cool, didn't speak any English, but was like helpful on telling me what to do. And then I was speaking to my friend who just so amazingly beautifully, her and her friend basically drove 5 hours to another point of Romania to come meet me. And we totally changed our plans. And it was one of those really interesting moments of like, I had become so overwhelmed by this situation. My friend had dealt with it so calmly and adjusted. And I was like, that's what I need to like lean into more, just this flexibility of like things go wrong and you make mistakes and you have to be
Mm-hmm.
able to adjust and change. I don't know if it's a like a British shyness or what it is. But I really hate that thing of being like a British foreigner in another country where I don't speak the language and I can't voice what I need. I don't know if it put me off or if it's just a feeling that I noticed after moving to Slovenia. Like my voice for a little while really shrunk when I couldn't speak in Slovene because I was just I really hate that image of like a Brit abroad that doesn't know how to kind of like find their way around. So I think I'd kind of imposed this image on myself that then blocked me from getting to places. But like I did a lot of traveling with friends, but I'm also somebody that doesn't often go to the cinema on their own or go for a coffee on their own or something like that. I think I really value, I don't know if it's security or comfort or whatever, of having another person there with you. Or there's just only so many hours and days to go and do stuff. And maybe I just didn't get myself to the solo travel bit yet. Because it's not necessarily something that I feel afraid of, but it's not something that I ever placed with such value that I would, take my holiday and money to do that. I would always do it with somebody else. And I'm not sure yet. I'm going to think about that after, whether that's a fear
Yeah.
thing or whether that's just a how it was thing.
Like I find that so fascinating to listen because Nadia, I want to hear from you, but just wanted to share the experience that I've had is that I think it's like I've never really looked into it, but I feel like part of it is because I am an only child and my parents pushed me to go places apart from like going on holiday with them, to be independent and go. So I started traveling as a teenager by myself to visit like family in different parts of Poland and Europe, and I loved it. And I think and I caught the bag. I was literally like, okay, coincidentally, I'm on a tram in Prague at 16. Nadia has just been to Prague, um, and listening to Avril Lavigne on my CD player, and I'm like, I'm living the life. Like I'm on my own, I'm on a tram, and this beautiful, architecture of Prague, and yeah, solo travel, and
That makes so much sense though as well. If we're thinking about like what from your childhood informs the way you do things later. As a kid, I was always training and my mum was always taking me to training sessions and competitions. So we were traveling a lot and I went abroad a lot and I competed in other countries, but always with a team and somebody else that was there. So maybe that is actually the thing that like my childhood brain is just like that bit is familiar, and so I've always then gone with groups, like little teams of people to places.
yeah, it makes sense that's like the safety of it that was familiar and appealing. But for me, I always went to be with people. So it's like I traveled on my own, but there were always people, and if they weren't, I just learned how to find them. So yeah, so I did couch surfing. So the host was there, so I always like had someone. So it's an interesting, like I was still seeking company. Like I always seek company. I always meet people. How has it been for you, Nadia? Like what's been your experience?
Yeah, it's really interesting hearing how different everyone's is because mine's also quite different in that I didn't grow up with any appeal of doing solo travel. Like even my first trip, I went with two friends and then did like a few days on my own within it. And then I kind of gradually did a little bit more, like a few weeks on my own within a bigger trip the year after, and then a few weeks. And then a few years ago, I did like my first intentional one-way ticket completely solo. So yeah, mine's been very gradual, not something I like grew up with. But what's always been innate is having time to myself. But I just had fears on doing that traveling. But because I love being by myself, it's obviously a natural fit. But I had to kind of shed a lot of those fears around doing it abroad. But once I did that, it was obviously the perfect fit, and I definitely caught the bug and realised I absolutely loved it. I think it's such a different way of traveling. So I always recommend people at least try it once in their life. Because for me, what I realized was as much as I still don't mind traveling with people, I think I'm someone who naturally goes with the flow and can like follow people. So then I don't really hold space for what I want to do in that moment when I'm traveling. Like, where do I want to
Mhm.
go? Or do I turn left or right on the street? And it's when you're on your own, you have to decide it all yourself. And I think that's when I was having such beautiful moments of just like meandering and getting lost, but in the perfect place, or having to be more decisive and intentional. And I just never had that with people. But I think if I was a bit more of an assertive, leading a group type person, then maybe the solo wouldn't make so much difference. But because I wasn't, it's made like a huge difference. So yeah, I love it. But I think I'm the opposite where I'll limit my time of meeting people and try and carve out as much like solitude as possible, or go somewhere really remote, and then an occasional, there's obviously benefits to traveling people. So I'm not like anti that. I do also enjoy that and love spending time with people, but I also really crave the solitude, I think.
Like by going in this way, you allow yourself to choose yourself rather
That's
than
beautifully put.
if your natural thing is that sometimes you would let other people lead. This feels like it's ultimate permission to just like, now is your time. What do you want?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what it is, and I think that's probably why travel has been so transformative for me, actually.
It's beautiful to watch you talk about it as well because you just look so like lit up by it. And this is definitely linking on to our next thing of becoming your most authentic self, which is what we were kind of thinking about next. So your journey, your work, your process, and you talk a lot about guiding your clients to becoming their most authentic selves through travel as well. So do you want to talk to this a little bit for us?
Yeah, so it's essentially a journey of kind of shedding what you are not, whatever you've picked up, whether it's from society, parents, or whatever it is. And travel is one beautiful container to hold space for that. But I also guide people outside of travel. So I also try and kind of share as much as travel is so transformative, we don't need to get attached to it. It's not the only path. Again, your intuition will guide you if it is or isn't. But essentially, I guide people through the phases of bloom, this kind of transformative framework with a mixture of transformational coaching, but I bring in some embodiment work and other inner journeys as well to kind of support that. But in a nutshell, it's letting go of these beliefs and things that we've attached to through the mind, but also through the body as pathways so that we can come back to our true essence underneath that, whether you call it your most authentic self or purest, truest essence, but where we can have the clarity to kind of feel into what life is really calling of us. And it's through that kind of shedding and then allowing what's emerging that we can kind of begin living the life we're called to more intentionally and guided by intuition. And travel is such a powerful way to kind of hold that space. But as I say, I do that through kind of one-to-one group programs and workshops, retreats, and other ways as well.
I love that phrase so much, shedding what you are not. That literally made like every cell of my body have a little like dance in response to that one. It's so good.
I felt the same. I was like, ooh, yeah, let's shed some more.
Really cool. And I love as well that whenever I've thought about travel before, and often when I hear people talk about travel, they talk about discovering the world and seeing all these other places and blah blah. But I like the lens that you're taking of that it's actually about discovering yourself within the world and these spaces.
So, last but not least, would you like to tell us and our listeners a little bit more about where they can find you and what is coming up in your work next?
Yeah, so all that I offer is on my website, which is just naudia.co.uk. So I do one-to-one group programs, but various workshops as well. And I've got a monthly free live that I do where I kind of spotlight different topics. So that's a good way to just get more familiar with how I work and learn more about the Bloom Blueprint as well. And I have got the one-to-one Bloom journey actually this September already opening, and then the group programs annual starting at the end of February. And I also share on Instagram, on my LinkedIn, and recently on YouTube too, and on Substack. So yeah, there's lots of places where you can find content and more about what I share. And my emails and DMs are always open as well for any questions. And I also offer free exploratory calls as well for kind of a one-to-one space to get more familiar and see if what I do is a good fit for you.
And if
Amazing.
people wanted to sign up for your free monthly thing that you've just started, so that feels
Yes,
very alive,
yeah.
how do people join you for this?
Yeah, so I'll share the link, but it's Seeds of Bloom is what it's called. So I've got a link for that. But also if you join my Substack, you'll automatically get invited to it as well. And it's yeah, first Wednesday of the month, 7:30 p.m. UK time. So free to drop in. And yeah, this will be it's only just started, so it feels very exciting and a good chance to kind of get involved.
Amazing.
I really, I mean, obviously, me and Martina are doing this podcast, so we feel the same way. This thing of like spaces where you can bring people together,
Mm.
that are super open and accessible are just so I love that this is a new thing that you've brought in. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, and it sounds amazing. I didn't get a chance to join the last one, but I'm hoping in September there's the next one, right? Yeah.
Yes,
We'll
yes,
share
next
all
one's
the
in February.
links in the show notes.
So Naudia, maybe you could talk us through your journaling prompts and also how you kind of personally set the scene for your journaling practice.
Yeah, so for setting the scene, I'll usually take a moment just to kind of tune inwards. So sometimes it's after meditation or a bit of movement, but there's no kind of hard rule for it either. But it's I do find that I get more out of it when I'm in a bit of a calmer state of mind. So I'll just have a bit of a check-in on where I am at, what I'm feeling, and do I feel like holding space for journaling is the kind of right time. But I usually follow kind of a sequence of spotlighting what's ready to be shared or let go and kind of what's emerging. So that's the kind of overarching flow I usually use, but it varies. But yeah, the four questions that I think would be quite helpful. So the first one is, what does becoming your truest self look and feel like to you? And why does this matter? So I always like to add in the kind of why question also to really see or tune into why it's important so we can really get clarity on that and to also focus on the feeling aspect of it. And then the second question is, what might be holding you back right now and where do you sense that comes from? So again, it's seeing into what is now ready to potentially be shared, but also holding space for what might be at the root of it. And that again might offer up some more insights or what that part of you may potentially even need to help you release it with more kind of compassion and love. And then the third question is, what new belief, truth, or perspective would support you at this stage of your journey? And again, this is a really good way just to get clear on those preferred beliefs that truly serve you, or the perspective shift that will help you come back to what's going to be most helpful. And then the fourth and final question is, what small aligned action can you take today to step closer to the life you want to create? And I think it's always important to have something actionable to help you cement and embody the change and kind of shift into the direction that you want to go in.
Mm. And when you think about the things that you feel ready to shed and what is emerging, do you have any advice for how to tap into this? Because shedding is something that I think the more you think about the things that you're ready to let go of, the easier it becomes. But if it's something that you've never really approached before, it can be quite big or confusing, perhaps.
Yeah, I think setting the intention is a really good starting point because when you set the intention and hold more awareness for it, usually insights and things will start beginning to come in, or you'll have more awareness of what you're potentially ready to shed. So normally whatever's ready to be released will come into our awareness in some shape or form. So starting that intention and being more observant is helpful, but also knowing that we don't have to kind of go digging for trauma or like forcing the shed. It can be like a natural unfolding, so we can be more
Mm.
gentle with ourselves. And I kind of bring in this I call it the art of conscious completion, so that we can do it through more of a lens of compassion and see whatever is ready to be shed, because at one point it was serving and protecting us, so we can be also grateful for it and get the lessons and insights from it. So there are, I guess, practical steps you can take to make that process a bit easier, but just knowing that it can be a gentle unfolding and whatever's ready will come into your awareness if you hold that space. And you can also use your intuition to guide you with whatever the process or step might be to help you shed it in a more kind of natural and aligned way as well.
And like your fourth question about like one small thing that you can do now, you also don't have to try to kind of make huge mindset shifts or get rid of massive beliefs that have been there for your whole life. It can
Mm.
be also small little tiny baby shedding, can't it?
Exactly. And I think also like it's your definition of action, because the aligned action could be to rest, to intentionally do
Mm,
nothing.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And actually that's so hard, isn't it? In my membership, one of my members, this is a conversation we constantly have for her. The hardest thing is to let herself rest, to just let her sit and do nothing. So there's no right or wrong way to set the things that you want to release or the steps that you want to take. They could be minuscule, they could be massive, and they can be everything between. It's whatever
Mm.
feels right for you.
Yeah, I think that's so important. Absolutely.
I love these questions. I feel like I need to spend some time with them tonight after listening to you read them as well. I really enjoy listening to you, Nadia, and I feel like you have such a unique way of seeing the world and putting what you're seeing into words as well. So I really appreciate this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been so lovely, and I love what you guys do in this space that you're creating. So I really appreciate you guys having me here and all the work you're doing and what you're sharing with the world as well.
Groovy babies. Is that the end of episode 6? Ah! Then, listeners, thank you very much for tuning in again to this episode. You can find everything that you need to contact Naudia and work with her below. And as always, you're very welcome to get in touch with me and Martina if anything comes up after listening today. So, big love to you all and see you in episode 7.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of Inner Landscapes. If you enjoyed it, give us a like or subscribe. This helps others find the podcast and expands the community space. If you know someone that would benefit from listening, send them the link to the episode. Building a community takes these kinds of small, loving actions, and we appreciate your support. If you've got any questions or want to get in touch, find us on Instagram. Alice is at creative_t_breaks, and I am at the kind space. Thanks again and have a lovely rest of your day or night.